الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم علمنا ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تنزلنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى الله على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. So alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to again like our 17th session of reading the Pinnacle Papers of Imam al-Buti. And we're on the second volume, Batin al-Ithim, or Inward Sin, on page 56. So just to recap about where we are in the book. So uh as you should know by now, or I think if we've all remembered by now, the content of the book is Imam al-Bulti is addressing why there is so much, because the question was asked him, why is there so much Islamic activity? Why do we have all these conferences and retreats and classes and durus and events and protests, whatever? There's all this stuff going on, but Muslims have not regained their place of supremacy that they had in the past, right? But the Ottoman Empire has not been revived, or the Abbasids, or just nothing's come back. We're still in this activism phase, and we haven't seen any progress on the greater scale of the matter. So, what Imam al-Bulti is addressing is he's saying, well, the problem is that the intention's not right. There's something wrong inwardly. Outwardly, everything looks great, right? Outwardly, everything. Oh, look at all these people. They're so dedicated. They're so busy. They're so active. This is being done, and this is being done, and books are being published, and courses are being held, and there's this event and this conference, and so on and so forth. But maybe, or most likely, or maybe definitely, is underneath the surface, the intention's not right. People are actually doing these things because they have worldly objectives, whether it's for money or for fame or for jealousy or for pride or whatever it is. And people are not actually working together. People are not actually doing these things for the sake of Allah, and therefore Allah's tawfiq is not being granted. Allah is not granting his success to these efforts. So where we are right now is that we are looking at the remedies. So, what is the road to using this remedy? So he says the remedy, and this goes back to page 41, and I'll repeat. So page 41, it says, what is the remedy to this situation? And again, this remedy is at the individual level. He says the remedy is to remember, my Muslim brother, our true identity in this life, and then the function for which we have been created. Then we need to keep remembering it whenever we forget it or become heedless of it. And then he goes on to explain, because what is our true identity? Is that we are Allah's slaves, right? We belong to Allah, and to him we shall return, right? And just to let you know, that is also discussed in Pinnacle Papers Volume 6, which is on its way, inshallah. Just have one last thing to add. But Pinnacle Papers Volume 6, there is, which is called Minasar al-Minhaj al-Rabbani, right? Some of the secrets of the divine approach. And the first chapter is available. You can read the first chapter if you want to. It's on the Safina Society blogs. You can look it up. You can read it. It's on my Telegram page. I've shared it on the Halakha Telegram group. That's where Imam al-Buti explains the wisdom behind slavehood to Allah. Right, the fact that the way human nature is that some human beings are stronger and more powerful than others. Right, some human beings have more intelligence, or they have greater wealth, and so on and so forth, and therefore the inevitable outcome, if people do not acknowledge their slave to Allah, the inevitable outcome is that you get a slave master class and you get an enslaved class. That's what happens to humanity. And the common example, or the most typical, and as well the most brilliant example, is Fir'aun and the children of Israel. Fir'aun says, "Ana rabbukum al-a'la," in Surah An-Naziyat, ayat 24. "Ana rabbukum al-a'la," right? So he doesn't acknowledge his slave to Allah, obviously, but the children of Israel, they also don't acknowledge their slave to Allah, and therefore that's how they end up being enslaved. Because if you, this is the other side of the coin people think about, is that if you acknowledge your slave to Allah, you will not let someone else enslave you, right? So if you want to read more about that topic, about the importance of slavehood to Allah, then please read that chapter. That's very, very important. That's going to be part of Pinnacle Papers Volume 6. So addressing this remedy, we go a few chapters forward, and we talked about two of these last week. We talked about these means of using this remedy. Like, how do you get back to this point of acknowledging your slavehood to Allah and remembering your slavehood to Allah? He says, number one, this is on page 49, is man must contemplate his essence and his final destination, that Allah Azza wa Jal is watching him, and he must become aware of it become aware of it again every time he becomes heedless or forgets. And then the second thing we talked about was adhering to a regular wird that consists of reading the book of Allah the Exalted, as well as glorification, seeking forgiveness, and other remembrances of Allah the Exalted. So that's where we finish off with this point of every day you should have something that you do regularly. There should be a portion of Quran that you read regularly. There should be a wird that you read regularly, um, and other du'as and adhkar, right? And this is not hard to establish, right? You can have, for example, read Surah Yasin in the morning, Surah Al-Waqi'ah in the evening, Surah Al-Mulk, Surah Al-Sajdah before you sleep, obviously Surah Al-Kahf on Fridays. And for the Shafis, Imam Shafi talk about this. It's in the Adhkar of Imam Nawawi, it's in the read Surah Al-Kahf twice, at night and on the daytime, in the daytime as well. That's twice. There's the wird of Imam Nawawi. That's a daily wird. There's also in the Adhkar of Imam Nawawi. You have, I'm mentioning Imam Nawawi a lot, I know. We're Shafis. But in the Adhkar of Imam Nawawi, for example, you're going to find like Adhkar al-Sabah, Adhkar al-Masa, right? Adhkar for the evening, Adhkar for the morning. Dalal al-Khairat is another good thing to incorporate into your life, because those are salawat in the Messenger of Allah, and then there's a portion that you do every day. And so this is very, very important, right? To have this as part of your life, to incorporate that part of your life. Now, the third thing, this is our main subject matter today, is, as he says on page 56, lots of supplication to Allah. And he says this remedy is an act of worship that bears massive importance. In fact, it is the core and essence of worship, right? This is what the ulama say. It's the mukh. It's the mukh al-ibadah. Dua is the mukh al-ibadah. And what he addresses here, because he addresses that problem that some people raise. And we can summarize this quite simply. Because he says, because people ask this question, that they say, why do I need to make dua? Why should I make dua when Allah already knows my needs, right? And that's true, right? Allah knows your needs and wants better than you do. Allah knows exactly what you're feeling, what pain you're going through, what hardship you're going through, your desires, your ambitions, your aspirations. Allah knows all these things, and Allah knows these things better than you do. So why are you making dua? You're making dua to manifest your slavehood. And then that's why Imam al-Buti gives a whole series of verses where Allah is commanding us, calling your Lord humbly and secretly. He does not love those who overstep the limits. So call upon Allah. Right? So the Surah Al-Araf, ayah 55, Surah Al-Ghafir, ayah 14. Surah Al-Araf, ayah 56. Right? And so forth. About 55, or that's quoted again. So there's a command to constantly make dua to Allah. Now, this is something that I was saying this to some people recently in a podcast, saying to people, again, we have to understand dua. So what I understand is that dua is not about the thing you're asking for. That's not what dua is about. Dua is not about the thing you're asking for. Dua is about meaning you don't make dua because you want that thing, because you want that car or that house or that spouse, whatever it is, or you want that problem solved. You're making dua because of who you're calling on. That's why you're making dua. You're making dua because you're manifesting your slavery to Allah. You're showing Allah that ultimately you need Him for everything. And this is why it's so important. We understand that there's a video I've got on my channel where it's a video where Imam al-Buti is talking about. There's a story of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, anhu, where he heard a man came to the Kaaba, and he made dua at the Kaaba, and he said, he addressed Allah, and he said, Ya man la yashghaluhu sam'un an sam'an. Right? So he addressed Allah and said, Oh Allah, the one who's not distracted by hearing one person from hearing someone else. Like Allah's listening to one person, He's not distracted from listening to someone else. Allah is listening to all of us at the same time. Every dua. Right? And He's not forced into a mistake, or he doesn't make a mistake because of the abundance of questioning. Right? Because you have to imagine, at any given time, there could be a billion people or more making dua to Allah. But Allah doesn't make any mistakes. Right? Allah doesn't mix up. The orders don't get mixed up. Right? And then Allah says, وَلَا يَتَبَرَّمُ, or the man says in the dua, he says, لَا يَتَبَرَّمُ مِنْ الْحَاهِ عِبَادِهِ الْمُلْحِحِينَ عَلَيْهِ. Right? So he says that, and Allah does not become weary or bored or fatigued because of the persistent asking of his slaves. Right? Uh, and then he says, "Well, I think he says, like, let me taste the coolness of your response and of your mercy." And and when Imam Ali heard this dua, he said to the man, he said, "Oh, repeat that dua for me." He said, "Repeat that dua for me." He said, "Oh," he said, "Subhanallah." But he said, "By Allah, whoever says this dua will have his sins forgiven, have his sins forgiven." So this that's a perfect example of someone addressing Allah from the bottom of his heart, and it's an example of someone who fully understands who Allah is. This is a true understanding of who Allah is. That Allah is listening to all our du'as all the time, 24/7, hundreds of millions, if not billions of du'as all the time. And Allah's not weary. Allah just wants to hear more from you. Allah wants to hear more from you. And this is why I've been saying in previous lessons, I've been saying here in this halaqah that, don't treat Allah like your boss at work, right? Like, I'll only ask him for the big stuff, right? The little things, I'll take care of that myself. You don't. That's not how you treat Allah. That's not how right? You should ask Allah for everything big and small, everything big and small, and this is all manifestation saved to Allah because you recognize that you could not get anything done without Allah. You cannot get anything done without Allah, right? Lifting your finger, blinking your eyes, taking a breath. You can't do any of that without Allah. So this is what we're getting at. So now he says here in this section, he says, man is only consciously aware of the importance of imploring and supplicating to Allah when he feels an urgent need for Allah the Exalted, and he is certain that no one else can help him. He has no hope except of him. At this point, he calls on him with a sincere heart, and he is fully alert and submissive, right? So here's the thing. Here's an example. So recently I was giving a lecture at a masjid, and we were talking about marriage. I was on the topic of marriage. Right? Nawabooks.com. Get your copy today. Um, and Amazon. Right, mashallah. But I was giving a talk about the book, and it's interesting how you could complete these concepts together. And there was a Muslim sister who had an issue with her husband, and she said, uh, like they weren't on speaking terms or something like this, and she said, "I've tried everything, right? I've tried to get so and so to talk to him, so and so. I've tried everything." And that's exactly what's been described here. Is I said, "Look, you've tried," and I had to say to him in my answer, I said, "Yes, you've tried everything within your capacity to do something, right? You've tried to get your dad to talk to him, or a brother to talk to him, or an uncle to talk to him. Uh, you've tried other ways to get through to him, and so on and so on, and nothing's worked. Which means what? You have no one left but Allah. That's what this means. You have no one left but Allah. So now you need to turn to Allah and sincere dua, because Allah has just shown you that nothing else works. That ultimately it's me. That's what Allah is saying to you. So you know what you have to do is turn to Allah into tahajjud. You have to turn to Allah in Salatul Hajj. You have to fast and make dua on that time. And this is what that's that's the that's the inward ni'mah of this, right? It's like the ayah in Surah Luqman, ayah 20, ayah 20, 31st chapter, ayah 20. وَاسْبَعْ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَهُ ظَاهِرَةٌ وَبَاطِنَةٌ. Right? Allah showers his blessings upon you. It's beautiful. Showers blessings upon you. ظَاهِرَةٌ وَبَاطِنَةٌ. Inwardly and outwardly, right? So like yes, we know what our blessings are, right? When we have our food and our health and our family and our faith and our income and so on. That's all. But there's what's an inward blessing. And Imam Ramadan explain what's an inward blessing is it's hidden in the tribulation, right? That so this sister was in this tribulation where she's seeing that uh she feels like no one can help her. What she really means is no human being can help you. That's what you mean, right? No human being can help. So at that point, what happens is it's like what Allah does is he sort of strips everything away between you and him. That's what Allah does. He strips everything away, right? Because everything between you and Allah is just means. It just means Allah created. So you strip all that away, and now it's just down to you and Allah. And now you just have to talk to Allah directly. Don't worry about so and so. Don't worry about so and so. Just talk to Allah. That's it. That's what this what comes down to. And this is why Imam Al-Buti is saying is that in that situation, a person will call on Allah with a sincere heart, and he will be fully alert and submissive, fully alert and submissive. Because because it's at that point that a person can truly see only Allah is in charge here. Only Allah is in control here, right? Everything else is just it's just a distraction. It's just means, right? And again, like we say, and not even means. You think about it, because like Imam Wolfi says in He says they're like asbab ja'aliyah, right? Which I translate as like they're like apparent causes. They're apparent causes, right? So, you drink water and it quenches your thirst. It looks like the water quenches your thirst, but it's not. It looks like the water quenches, but it's not. Allah quenches your thirst when you drink it, right? It's like people in Singapore. You read the Takhurat al-Sadida, right? And Shafi fiqh, Ustaz Jalaluddin. You read, you read the book Takhurat al-Sadida.
Not, no.
Okay, well, it's a very good Shafi fiqh book. You should read it, mashallah. But the Sheikh says at the beginning, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Kab, when in Bab al-Ma, when he's describing what water is, right? That it's a fluid and it's transparent. Yatalon biloni, like the yatalon will biloni. He like it takes on the color of its vessel. And then he says, وَيَخْلُقُ اللَّهُ الرِّيَّ عِنْدَ تَنَاوُلِهِ. Right? Allah creates the satiation. Allah creates the quenching of the thirst when you drink it, right? Meaning it's not the water itself, right? It's not the water itself that cures the thirst, right? It's not the food that gets rid of the hunger. It's not the paracetamol or the aspirin, whatever it is that gets rid of the headache, right? It's Allah who does it. And that's what these situations do is they strip all that away and you realize that Allah is the causer of all causes. Now, so he says, you could have someone who lives in sin and constantly indulges his desires and lusts. He feels nothing but the immediate pleasure and gratification. If you were to advise him to supplicate to Allah to remove him from his current state, he would laugh at you and see was no different. Someone says, ask Allah to bring deprivation and misery upon yourself, right? So again, so someone who's immersed in their pleasures, right, and their gratification of those pleasures and their gratification of their desires, people like that, they don't really feel dua, right? Right. So he says when they say dua, they might say Amin after someone else, right? They might say like a few like formulaic duas on their tongue. They might say, oh, astaghfirullah, whatever, right? But they're not feeling it, so to speak, right? Um, and then you might try to give advice to this. You might try to give advice to this person and say, maybe you should stop doing this. Maybe you should stop drinking. Maybe you should stop fornicating. And then the guy will raise his hand and say, oh, Allah yahdini, right? May Allah guide me. May Allah forgive me. Right? He's not being serious. He's not being serious. He's just trying to get rid of you. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to get you to walk away because he's enjoying himself and doesn't want you to be distracting him. So that's part again of the wisdom of tribulation, right? Is that the tribulation can break all of that and make someone realize, oh, yes, I really, really, really need to make dua to Allah. That's what tribulation does. It breaks all of that. And this is like we discussed this in the book Man, Allah, Justice on Earth, about the man who was there's a man named Imam Ramadan who was living a life like that, where he was wealthy and he had all kinds of enjoyments and pleasures, and then he became severely ill, and that severe illness brought him near to Allah. Brought him so close to Allah that he said, if I were cured and I lost this nearness to Allah, I wouldn't want to be cured. I wouldn't want to be cured. Right? Something to think about. So Imam al-Buti continues and he says that you also have to remember that yes, he says here when the disobedient person tastes the humiliation of disobedience in his conduct and his heart feels grief. Yeah, so he says again, so someone is disobedient. He needs Allah's tawfiq. He needs Allah's tawfiq. And in this, everyone needs Allah's tawfiq to be successful in this, right? It's through Allah's blessings. And it's again, something we've discussed that's in the book Depression and Anxiety, the point that if you've spent many years of your life remote from Allah, not being a committed believer, engaged in all kinds of sin, and then you try to turn back to Allah, that in and of itself is a great sign, or if not the greatest sign, that Allah loves you, that He's put that in your heart to come back, and therefore you have to make dua, make lots of dua. And he gives an example here. He said again, when someone is Muslim is sincere, and he sincerely strives to come back to Allah, Allah will give him that tawfiq, right? Because he has a sincere desire for goodness, and he makes sincere dua to Allah with submissiveness and humility. And he gives the story. He says there was one day I was in the courtyard of the university. This would be Dimashq, University of Damascus. A young man stopped me and complained to me in a state of anguish and pain that his soul was urging him towards evil and he was struggling to get control of it and subdue it. He also mentioned that university life was making his soul even more voracious, like his soul, his nuts becoming more becoming greedier. He thus implored me to show him how to rid himself of this torment. I said to him, look at this agony and hope that you are presenting to me in the form of a complaint. Present this complaint with even more anguish to your Lord, right? This anguish and pain you're feeling, this petition Allah, go to Allah and state this. Have an intimate conversation with him and beseech him at a time in which there's no one between you and him, right? Most likely tahajjud time. Ask him to grant you tawfiq and strength. If you do that and you do so repeatedly, Allah will answer your supplication and free you from the torments of your soul in the easiest of ways. Okay, and this makes it so easy because when someone's in that state and they feel so helpless, that's when the dua is best. It's like that's when you get the highest quality dua is when someone is in a broken state. When someone feels helpless and they feel no one can help them, they turn to Allah. That's when the dua is at its sincere state. It's the highest quality dua. And he says, and this is, and then he talks here in the next paragraph, talks about the compelled slavehood and the earned slavehood, right? Because everyone's Allah's slave, right? That's the book, yes, Muhammad. Yeah. I'm looking to see if it was Film Masal Mufida, right? Kitab al-Ibadat. There's a few volumes. There's Ibadat and Muamalat, and there's a few more in the pipeline, like Munakahat and Jinayat, I think. So compelled slavehood, that's the slave that everyone has, right? Everyone has that slavehood. Every single human being has that slavehood because every human being was created by law and every human being is therefore law slave. But then we have the earned slavehood, which is when you willfully turn to Allah and you acknowledge your slavehood. You acknowledge that you are helpless. You acknowledge that you can't do anything without him. So, and then after that, he talks about this point. He says that people, you might have seen people making light of supplication, arguing that, like, what's the point? Because, Allah knows what I want, what I need, and everything's already written. And again, we've discussed this before. The point of the dua is to manifest your slavehood to Allah. It's not about the thing that you're after. Again, he quotes Surah Al-Ghafir, 60. Ad'uni astajib lakum. Call me and I'll answer you. And just something to like raise here again. It's like I've been saying this in some lectures recently. The point, and it's on my blog, it's on my YouTube channel. Like Imam Sha'rawi talked about this as well. He said, like, dua. He said one of the things about dua is, Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah 2:16, Allah says, "Asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa takrahu shay'an wa khayrun lakum, wa asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa sharrun lakum, wallahu ya'lam antum la ta'lamun." Allah knows and you don't know. So Imam Sha'rawi's interpretation, he said, therefore, you should never ever say that your dua was not answered. Right? And what he means by that, what Imam Sha'rawi means by that, is he says that the fundamental, when you make dua to Allah for something, right? The car, the house, the wife, the job, whatever it is you're asking for, right? To pass your test or to, get your next book published, whatever it is you're asking Allah for, right? What you are fundamentally asking Allah for is khair, right? That's what you're fundamentally asking Allah for. You're asking Allah for khair because you're asking, but the catch is you're asking Allah for what you think is khair, right? From your perspective, right? But Allah knows. Allah said, "Yeah, wallahu ya'lam." Allah knows what is khair. So what happens is you ask Allah for khair, and Allah gives you the khair that He knows. That's why He answers your dua. He gives the khair that He knows, not the khair that you think is khair, right? So there's a very clear distinction that should be made. So he goes on in al-Buti to talk about about this command to make dua and how you should do it. And you should especially do it in the time of ashar, right? Surah Al-Dhariyat, ayah 18, right? In those pre-dawn hours, they seek forgiveness. That's the best time to make dua. But also when you're fasting, I also recommend that. Salat al-Hajj is excellent dua to make at any time. And fasting as well. I mentioned fasting because there's two narrations about this. Imam Nawawi in the Adhkar, he says that there's three people who have a dua that's answered. And he said, al-Sa'im hatta yuftir, right? The fasting person until he breaks his fast. One narration says, Hina yuftir, when he breaks his fast. But look at the other one, hatta yuftir, until he breaks his fast. So the whole day when you're fasting, you can make dua to Allah. And he says here that you must, however, maintain this state. That's what he says at the end of this point 3. He says, you must, however, maintain this state, because fleeing to Allah from the brains of your soul can only be in this way. So the point is this, and this is something that we made clear, Hazm and I, in the book about where we were translating Imam Multi's words. This very, very important point about like Allah's medicine. Like Allah's medicine, when Allah puts you in a state of tribulation and you're trying to draw near and you're trying to rectify the tribulation you're in, or your heart's battle with it, so to speak. And Allah brings you closer, and Allah tells you that you should be reading the Quran. And Allah tells you, or the Messenger of Allah also tells you, or the man tell you, they tell you that they're all that you should have and du'as that you should be making. Once you're in the habit of doing those things, you keep doing them, right? It's not like a prescription from a doctor. Take this for 7 days, and when you feel better, stop, right? Or if you have any problems, come back and see me, right? That's not the case, right? The case is that once Allah's put in that situation, you carry on. So what he says here at the end of this chapter, he says, as long as you are alive, you must continuously climb that ladder, right? So here's the thing. It's something we Al-Buti talks about a lot, and we talked about these halaqat, is the importance of taking care of the inward enemy before the outward enemy, right? That's why it's an inward sin, right? The outward enemy has no hope against you if you are taking care of the inward enemy, right? Because here's the thing: as long as you're alive, you're never going to win that battle. You're never going to beat the inner enemy. You're never going to beat shaitan and your nas and hawa and the dunya. You're never going to beat them. What you're being commanded to do, though, is to be in a winning position. You're not going to, as long as you're alive, you can't say I've won. You can't wake up tomorrow morning and say, I did it. I won. I beat shaitan. No. Shaitan's going to come back and back, come back and come back and back. So the point is, you have to be in a winning position. You have to be leading the match. You have to be winning position. And as long as you're in a winning position, then you can deal with the outward enemies. Okay, so that's like the statement of Imam Ghazali. Before you deal with the dog in the street, deal with the dog in the house. Before you deal with the dog in the house, you deal with the dog in the heart. Right. So it's dealing with those inward enemies, and it's not something that you just win like that. You have to rather you have to keep yourself in a winning position, because it's not a one-off thing, right? It's a campaign, right? The campaign to ward off these diseases, these campaigns to better yourself. The struggle, it's a campaign. It just goes on and on and on. It doesn't just end. You don't just win on Sunday and then celebrate on Monday. That's not how it works. Now, the last thing that he talks about, this is the last few pages, and then we'll for Q&A, and we'll do the chapter names. Does that not concern us? We'll do that next time, inshallah. I'll make a note so I'm aware of the time. Is he talks about the importance here of avoiding consumption of the unlawful, avoiding consumption of the unlawful. And this is something that Imam Ghazali talks about in Kitab al-Halal Haram, the book of the Law of the Unlawful, which really should be reprinted. Now this topic of how you have to be careful with avoiding the unlawful. Absolutely. Imam Ghazali also in that book, and also you look in the Hadith 6, the Arabian Nawawiyah, and you can read the commentary in Al-Wafi, Hadith number 6, is the importance of of avoiding things that are ambiguous or ambivalent. You don't know, like, is this doubtful matters, or I don't know what the ruling is, but the unlawful especially. And what he talks about in this section, this 3-page section, is he says that there are people who engage in unlawful wealth and they don't care, right? That they're not concerned about where their wealth is coming from, right? So are they being nourished by the haram? Are they being nourished by riba? Are they being nourished by certain unlawful sources, right? So for example, I live out in the UK now, and I put a fatwa on my blog about this, because I'm in here in the UK, and you got people who say, like Muslims say, yeah, I got a job in a bank, but it's okay. I'm just dealing with the IT side of stuff, right? I just deal with the IT side of stuff, right? I'm just like a program manager or a software developer, right? And I think the fatwa on my blog is from one of the other from Sham. The question is, okay, well, you work for a bank. Where does your wage come from? Right? Like, how does a bank make money? How does it think about it? How does it, right? The bank makes money from riba, right? That bank, the profits that a bank makes, from which it's going to pay all of its employees, including the IT guys, the software developers, and the program managers and whatnot. That money's coming from mortgage lending, credit card lending, basic loans, and so on and so forth. That's where it comes from, right? So you have to think this through about where your income is coming from. And he says here that when people don't care about these things, it leads to a hardness of the heart. It leads to a hardness of the heart, and therefore, when this one has that hardness of heart, um, he says nothing's going to help. Like reciting ayat to this person, preaching to this person, it's not going to help because the heart gets hard because it's being satiated with the haram, right? This is why there's that story I remember now of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq anhu, where he ate some food and then he found out afterwards that it come from an unlawful source, and he put his finger down his throat and he spat it out, and he said, because the haram is for the fire. The haram is for the fire. If I have haram inside me, where am I going to end up? Right? And he quotes the hadith here. Imam quotes the hadith from Muslim and Tirmidhi, where, and this is the 10th hadith in the 40 Nawawiyah, 10th hadith in the Nawawiyah. So I've also put a reference for al-Wafi, but I think that's the first edition. I said page 83, but it might be, but it's the 10th hadith. It's the 10th hadith. And it says, Allah is pure, only accepts that which is pure. And then in the hadith we have the disheveled, dusty man lengthening his journey, stretching his hands up the sky, and he says, Lord, Lord, but his food is unlawful, his drink is unlawful, his clothing is unlawful. So how can he be answered? Right. So again, so this point 4 ties into point 3. So to point 3, it's all about the importance of dua and something to Allah and turning to Allah. But it's like, how's your dua going to be answered if your clothing is haram, your food is haram, and your drink is haram? So he says, how many are the Muslims today whom you could measure by the standard of the prayer, outward acts of worship, the use of prayer beads of their tongues being used for exhortations and embellished religious words? And how few are the Muslims today who you measure by the standard of refraining from unlawful wealth and adhering to Allah's limits therein, and seeking the Allah's pleasure with regard to what enters their pockets, right? So he says, so what he's saying is it's very easy. You want to look around, you want to find Muslims who dress like Muslims, and they have prayer beads, and they have big beards, and they do all these outward acts of worship, and they read the Quran. But he says, and that's there's many of those, but like, how many people can you actually judge and say they actually care about their income, they care about their wealth, and they check these things, right? Because I've been in situations where yeah, I'm at a masjid, and I meet people on the masjid committee, and it's like there's one guy on the masjid committee owns like a liquor store, another guy is a mortgage broker. Like, it's this complete split between like ibadat and muamalat, right? Which reminds me, this is an interesting. There's an excellent book, not just for Malikis but for everyone else. There's a book called Ash-Sharikat by Imam Muhammad Ta'wil, the great Moroccan faqih who passed away about 10 years ago, rahimahullah, and he talked about this in his book of Sharikat, because he's trying to talk about, like, where does this split come from, right? This part of the problem is that there's this sort of split in the Muslim mindset where people think, okay, well, ibadat, like in my ibadat, so my prayer, my fasting, and my hajj, and my in those things, I need to obey Allah and follow fiqh. But when it comes to my transactions, no. Right? That's just dunya stuff. I don't have to worry about what Islam says, quote unquote, when it comes to my business and my income and my transactions and so on and so forth. Right? And he says, no, all of this is deen, right? Mu'amalat and ibadat. It's all deen, and Allah and His Messenger, so Allah have given us commands and rules to follow. So he concludes, Imam Al-Buti, he says these 4 remedies, right? So these 4 remedies being aware of your state, and being aware of your state, having a regular wird, making lots of dua, and purifying your income are the inevitable way to rectify the heart and rid it of these illnesses that the Quran has described as batil ithm. Without this remedy and being concerned with inward sin, the Muslims will not rectify anything. They will not be brought together upon any truth, and they will not rid themselves of the various obstacles that they are complaining about today. Alhamdulillah.